Okay, hello everybody. Welcome to this week's Talent Talk. Couple of kind of quick bits of general every time intro. So this is informal. We invite any questions or any arguments or get involved. Say something nice, as Recruiter Zone tells us. Say something that's not nice. I don't really care. If you've got something to talk about, put it into the comments. The kind of comments chat bit rather than clicking ask a question, because we'll see it there more easily. This is a pretty, tell the guest not to look so grumpy before you even start. Believe me, he was laughing until we went live.
This is my serious work face.
Serious work face, yes. Okay, so we're going to be talking about a really important subject. I'm just going to talk for about 1 minute right now about my thoughts on this as a background, and then I'm going to introduce our guest, James Lancaster. So we're talking about content in the context of recruitment. My view, as I say here pretty much every week, is that recruitment is much more of a marketing-led discipline, and marketing can control the pipeline for both candidates and clients if you're in an agency. More so than ever before. And so what I mean by that is you can create a funnel or a pipeline of clients and candidates by distributing great content to them, by really personalizing it, by giving them a variety of different pieces of content subjects according to what they're interested in, and across different channels and in different formats. Now, to do that, you need to do it yourself, or you need to get somebody to do it for you. And so with that, I introduced James. So James Lancaster is Managing Director of Scribe, and he can talk about the business a bit more in a more effective way than I can. So I'll let him do that in 1 second. But the reason I've got him on is because he really understands that for a variety of different purposes, sharing brilliant content is going to drive demand. And it's going to do a lot of the heavy lifting that in the past recruiters needed to do by cold calling people. I personally believe cold calling is futile, and I believe that marketing and a content-led approach can really take over the kind of building of the top and middle of the funnel of the pipeline, so that recruiters are just having to talk to the people that are basically warm and doing all that background kind of research and all that type of thing. So James, please just first off, give us a quick introduction. What does your sort of CV look like, and what's Scribe?
So I'll try and look happy while doing it. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is James Lancaster. My background actually is 20 years ad agencies and media. So I was TMP, Mediacom, TCS back in the day, and then for 7 years was a specialist sales director at the Daily Telegraph Media Group. So Scribe is I really loathe the word agency. It's a content house, really. So in this iteration, Scribe has been only live for about 6 months, but for the last couple of years, I and my colleagues have been working with various organizations, publishers and direct clients on content. So, and Scribe came out of that because we became aware that there were specialist requirements. So actually coming at it from the same individual niche markets required individual niche products and solutions. So Scribe came out of that in that we marry specific content suppliers, specific content producers to markets. So really, we're a matching service almost. We work with about 25, 30 journalists, about 30 copywriters, all of whom have individual skill sets, specialist skills.
Okay, really cool. So it's a virtual business?
Yes, so it is, and then we commission work as and when required in the format that required. So one of the things I noticed from my media days was that actually I had access to a number of specialists who had been writing about subjects for years, who had in-depth knowledge that wasn't getting leveraged, wasn't getting used. And actually, when people were talking about brand, they were getting generalist writers to write about specialist subjects.
Yeah.
And I felt that was a missed opportunity.
Yeah. No, I absolutely agree. It's very much is a missed opportunity. Okay, so you've got one of these kind of very modern businesses, which is based around a flexible kind of workforce and kind of almost on-demand type service, I guess.
Entirely bespoke. So this is, as I said to you earlier, this is where the magic happened, which is my kitchen table. But I work remotely, so as do all of my writers. So I work with freelancers, freelance video, freelance art direction and copywriting or journalism, and we build a team dependent on client needs. So you only pay for. And that was another thing that we realised, was that quite often when you use maybe a West End brand agency, you're paying for an established team. Yeah. And what we felt in some of the specialist areas in which we work, so recruitment and education obviously being two, that actually, you might not have a requirement for an SEO specialist. You might not have a requirement for, a journalist or a copywriter full time. So we build teams on a bespoke basis.
Mm. Okay. Let's go into some of the key things that you need to think about, and I think we've got pretty shared views on a lot of this, but maybe looking at it from slightly different angles. Let's talk first off about, you're an advertising guy really by background. Mm-hmm. So why content? Why content now versus advertising?
I think advertising I think has a kind of a slightly sort of a murky reputation, but actually increasingly, and certainly my time in media, advertising has always included content. It's always included, certainly as the digital world became more and more developed, it's always involved things like behavioral targeting, things like audience extension, things like ability to marry obviously advertising against relevant text, relevant editorial. So actually advertising, now, and hasn't been for quite a while, just a straightforward purchase of space or inventory. But the messaging within advertising remains fairly simple. It's kind of aspirational in tone. It's buy this. It's we are the greatest. It's sort of full of hyperbole. And actually, part of what I enjoyed doing, and the Telegraph was a multi-million-pound media stream, revenue stream, I beg your pardon, was actually marrying content and then developing content on behalf of direct clients. So talking about not just the hyperbole, not just the one-line tag, but actually a far more sort of developed over time proposition. And that's really what excited me, and that's why I launched Scribe.
Yeah. Okay. So, recruiting animals just made a good point, which actually I agree with him as well on this. But it's when you described, advertising's aspirational. I mean, go on to Indeed and find some aspirational stuff on there. I dare you. But his comment here is, I never understand it when people say that it's possible to make job ads seem interesting instead of factual. I absolutely agree with that. It's not really that easy to do, but you can make your organization seem much more interesting by using lots of different channels and formats that are not job ads.
Yeah. I mean, a job ad is a distinct tool within the recruitment world, but it's not the be all and end all of recruitment advertising. And it's not, it's the kind of sharp end. It's the holiday listings. It's the auto trader. It's all those things. And of course, there are skills to make sure it works as hard as possible. Location and salary, and and all those things. Logo and all the sort of classic skills that we've talked about for years. But the job ad itself is a really small part of what I would talk about in terms of content marketing, content advertising around the recruitment space.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. It's for the people that have already made a decision. They're in the market. They're looking for a job. Yes. So if you're not looking for a job, which according to LinkedIn, 80% of people are not currently looking for a job, the job advert's an ineffectual tool, really. And there's other things that you need to do that are going to bring people through the funnel much more than a job ad. But of course, for almost every employer and for almost every agency, 90% of their spend on content is on job board credits. And that's plain wrong.
Well, it has a place. I don't want to. He says, beginning to sweat slightly because I work on behalf of a couple of job boards. But I absolutely agree that they are not. That they're a tool. They're a tool in the armory, like anything else is a tool in the armory. And they work as well as they can, but it's all the work behind them you need to be doing to make them the most effective they can be.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Incidentally, just as a caveat, I am not wholesale slagging off job boards, because they do have a place, for sure. They do have a place. And I split up. So we think about recruitment in terms of this funnel. And you can be really granular about it, and you can think about a funnel in terms of suspects, visitors, leads, action, prospects, customers. I think about it in terms of different stages of a candidate journey, being awareness, education, consideration, decision. Mm-hmm. It's the same thing, just a little bit more simplified. But there are a lot of people who will skip a lot of those steps, and they'll go from being I'm not in the market to I'm in the market, and I'm straight on to Indeed or Monster or Total Jobs or whatever it is. I split it up in terms of 3 different kind of, let's call it job levels. So there's volume. So people that work in things like retail and hospitality and construction. And do they make decisions without a huge amount of consideration? So a lot of them do. Yeah. They realize they could get a certain amount of extra money by going from that company to that company, or they realize that actually they could get better shifts going from that company to that company. Or it might be just one really simple thing that makes them go, F this, I'm not working here, I'm working there. Then there's the level above that, which the people all make decisions in a slightly similar way. Doesn't even matter what stage of their career they're at, but I call it qualified volume. And it's people that work in sales, marketing, software engineering, HR, IT, those kinds of people who they consider that they have a career rather than a job. And they will go and do a lot more research, and they will go and review, according to Boston Consulting Group, they'll review 16 online sources of information before applying for a job, with over half of those sources being not on the career site. So it's a really, really disparate kind of journey that these people go through. And for them, the whole kind of content piece is the vital bit for them. And the exec search area, sorry, just quickly to discount the exec search area, because at the exec search area, they really care about a company's vision, as in probably the board's vision, and they really care about the company's values, corporate social responsibility, governance. And these are all factual things that they can find from the company's investor relations pages. They want to be headhunted, and they want to be, the red carpet rolled out to them. But all these people in that middle area, which I call qualified volume, they're going to read they're going to consume a lot of different pieces of content before they actually move on anywhere.
That is true. And also, just to slightly go back on something that you said in terms of the funnel, there's this broadly true belief that it's we talk about purchasing funnels, we talk about sales funnels or talent pipeline. But actually what we're now finding, and obviously, I don't work solely in recruitment, in things like travel and automotive, is that actually it's what we refer to as snakes and ladders rather than a funnel. So those 16 pieces of content don't necessarily conform to a linear journey.
No,
they don't necessarily conform to a set process through which we have to carefully shepherd our chosen audience. Mm-hmm. It's not like that. People will dip in and dip out. They'll different entry points. Et cetera, et cetera. So, yes, absolutely. Content is key. Content is king, as the kind of cliche phrase goes. But it's not necessarily as logical as we would, as I think sometimes we believe, and as we would hope.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Just quickly touch on a couple of points on the side here. So Louise asked if I've got a source for my job board credit stat, Adam? And the answer is no, it's entirely made up. So my thinking
as our 97% of stats, I believe.
yes. No, I think that most agencies and most in-house teams spend 90% of their money on their money that's devoted to content on job board credits and writing job board adverts than on anything else.
But it's certainly true, isn't it, that companies spend far more on attraction than they do on management of talent. So it's that, that's certainly true, and you're right. A job board and advertising, straightforward advertising, is a very large part of that.
Yeah, I mean, it's changing. Obviously, Louise, as you know, I'm doing my bit to try and change that, because my vision is that a company's database, whether it's an agency or an in-house team, their database becomes the primary source of candidates, and they actually end up having to do less top of the funnel net new candidates in, because they're really farming their database far, far better. And so, that would be what I would encourage people to do.
Well, what we always talked about in publishing terms, what publishers talk about is sort of three things really, which is inspire, educate, and advise. Yeah, and that's the kind of journey that a publisher will try and take its audience on. And inspire means the kind of what we used to refer to as a property porn or travel porn. The big glossy pictures, sun-kissed beaches, fast cars, big houses. And then it's about education. So it's about what does that cost? How do you get there? What are the prices for that sort of thing? And what are the sort of salary in that case? But then it's advice. And really the biggest single difference you can make to your success rate is providing as close to live and truthful advice as you can. And some of the stats I've seen talk about reducing your kind of fallout rate by 400% and things like that. So, so that last piece is where, for me, the interest and the interesting stuff starts to be, because it's not just spending money on the big bold stuff. It's really digging into the data. Yeah, and saving yourself money, as you say, by not having to refill the funnel every 6 months.
Yeah, absolutely. Rob's comment is that contractors tend to skip more rapidly. Yep, that's absolutely true. And my belief is that a content-led approach to, if you've got a database of your contractors, a content-led approach is going to get them continually looking at what you've got to say in terms of skills and how to get ahead in your career and the latest things that people are looking for. And if you can give them advice and content that's useful and relevant, then they're going to keep coming back to your content specifically. And then, of course, you can track and using something like Candidate ID, you can track and score what they're doing, and you can therefore understand exactly who's in the market at any one time, which helps you get to shortlist much faster. That's probably the first time I've mentioned Candidate ID on a talent talk in at least 2 months. Recruiting Animals' point is, does anyone care about the boss's version of the company vision as opposed to the employee's experience of it? People want both. So they absolutely want to hear. Yeah, no, they definitely want to hear what the boss's version of the company vision is what is on the website and what that person says in their corporate video and all that sort of thing. But people absolutely want to know what the employees are saying. And so the very best employer brand and recruitment marketing organizations I know are putting a lot of peer level kind of communication in there. Of course, it's normally been glossed, so people will go onto Glassdoor.
Yeah, absolutely. And actually, you would hope that the boss's version of the company vision, it shouldn't be that different from the employee's experience of it. So, it's to disconnect people who are interested in the potential disconnect and where. So absolutely. But I think the boss's version of it is important because it shows you the direction of travel, one hopes.
Yeah, it shows you the aspiration. And the aspiration might not. The problem is when the aspiration is pitched as this is where we're at.
Yes, it's a one game, and the game is won and over, and that's of course not true.
It shows you the baloney. I don't even know what baloney is, but I know what it means. It means rubbish.
Ours or the bosses. I don't know which he's referring to.
Yeah, okay. Rob, rate and location, type of work are the usual drivers, at least for who we deal with. Career isn't important. I guess it depends. So this is back to the contractors thing, I think. I guess it depends on whether the contractor is, I guess it depends on what level they're working at. If they're a contractor in cleaning or they're a contractor in technology transformation, that's going to make a difference as to whether or not they care about career, isn't it?
Well, interestingly, if you look, I've done some work, a lot of work, fair amount of work in the STEM area, actually. And if you look at, say, something like civil engineering, engineering in general, what you find, certainly amongst contractors, is almost the desire to collect interesting projects. So they will want to work on, the high speed rail, HSE if they can, or the Channel Tunnel or Crossrail if they're that sort of whatever type of engineering they're in, that they try and collect sort of, if you like, blue chip projects, because that helps their career for the next one, and the next one obviously has a direct impact on what they can charge. So, and that obviously has a knock-on effect in the sort of content you might produce. So you talk probably less about your corporate brand and vision, talk about less about flexibility of work, etc., because contractors, by dint of being contractors, have a fair amount of flexibility, and you talk more about the specifics, and you talk about, and your language might change. So, Rob is absolutely right, but it just informs what you produce.
Yep. No, you're right, and to be fair, most are too cynical to care about the company vision. But yeah, they're also probably will never feel as if they are part of that business. So it's like Han Solo. Yeah, Han Solo worked for the Rebel Alliance, but he wasn't really part of the Rebel Alliance, and so he didn't care about their vision. He just wanted paid and have a bit of fun.
As any Star Wars fan will know, he did really. He just hid it under a veil of cynicism. Yeah. But no, I think you're right. But actually, that's not good or bad. It's just what informs, what informs how you communicate to them. So, once you know that, and once you accept that, and accept what your likely results are going to be, what success looks like, then that's just another tool to work with.
Yeah, a couple of comments on things you've mentioned. So the snakes and ladders. So a lot of people think the candidate journey is linear. It used to be linear because it was advert in the newspaper, apply, go and see a recruiter, yes or no, you're in or out. That's what it was, but it's not anymore. And you use a snakes and ladders analogy, which I quite like.
Yeah, absolutely. And it just means that obviously people, we know, don't we, that, individuals are more empowered. People, as you say, look for far more information before making any formal decision, and actually are far more likely to back out of a process once they've entered now, because information is consistently available to them. So that's where the kind of snakes and ladders analogy comes in, is that actually, you can work very, very hard, but because you've got them in the top of the funnel doesn't mean that you're going to automatically they're going to straight to the bottom or even fall out in a linear way. Actually, they'll be at different stages at different times, and you need to reflect that.
So you might find this interesting. My colleague Scott describes the same thing as the flight of the bumblebee.
Right. Well, yeah, absolutely.
They go in and you don't know which way they're going to go next. And, their journey is completely unpredictable.
And actually, and that's a strength, and it's unpredictable. One of the things yes, absolutely, you can package things up, but it's a different journey for everyone, and a different journey for every different type of audience. So the ability to serve each of those as closely as you can has got to be key. Yeah,
absolutely. Another point you made, which was that cliche about content is king. One thing I really enjoyed was, so there's so many organizations that put together brilliant content and then it never sees the light of day. I was with a customer this morning who was talking to me about the fact that they've got loads of brilliant videos on Vimeo. But nobody sees them because they don't share them properly. So
the full phrase is, if content is king, then distribution is King Kong, and actually what that means is absolutely that. Yes, absolutely, you need content, but if you're not getting it out to where it needs to be, then you've lost the then you've lost the battle.
So I'm not sure if you're aware, but in Madagascar, they've got like plants and animals, which effectively are kind of like plants and animals that are in other parts of the world.
Yeah.
But it's like a parallel ecosystem. There's been no cross kind of pollination and cross breeding and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And what you've just said, so your content is king, but distribution is King Kong. I was about to say to you, content is king, but distribution is queen, and she wears the trousers.
Right. Okay. I like mine. I prefer mine.
Yeah. Okay. Moving on to a little bit more detail. Let's talk about engagement over views, because I know that this is something that you think about. What's your kind of take on that, on the trade-off between engagement and views? So
I think a lot of what clients within niche markets are doing, if you go back slightly and you talk about where I think a lot of the conversation focuses around brand, and if you like, tries to mimic the journey of a marketeer rather than someone within a recruitment space, is that quite often we're talking to a closed audience. So you're talking to an audience with actually is never going to be universal, and we're grateful for that. So in terms of pure numbers, a brand advertising campaign is open-ended, aspirational, and is a numbers game.
Yep.
And that's great, but it's not the same in recruitment. It's not the same in other areas. And actually, so engagement over views. People will talk about views as a measure of success, and that's fine. But actually, what you want, surely, and again, to take refuge in cliche again, but you want the one person applying for the perfect person applying for the perfect job. Is your ultimate success. And
yep.
so actually, you want measuring engagement. You want to be measuring, how many times they come back. You want to be measuring how long they're staying on your site, where they're clicking onto. Are they registering? Are they, if you like, a fully paid up member of your community that you're building, rather than a KPI, a performance indicator, just being numbers based, because that isn't the game that we're in.
Yeah. Okay. Also, about in terms of the relationship that companies have with people. So, can an employer brand have relationship with candidates?
I think so. Yes, absolutely. An employer brand. The perennial question has always been how to differentiate the employer brand from the overall marketing brand, and that remains difficult. But absolutely, if you look at things like, cliche again, but Virgin, if you look at some of the larger organizations, their employer brand is fantastic. People can have a relationship with individuals, but again, I think it needs to be, there are challenges within that are different perhaps in recruitment than there are within brand. So the relationship one has to have in the recruitment sphere is ultimately more honest. It has to be more warts and all. It has to be more authentic. It has to show far more truth. That you're not making promises that they're not going to find out about, the whole the glass door, etc. You have to work harder at it.
Yeah, and just on that, how do you go about really getting the truth? Because if you're creating content for an employer or for an agency or for the job boards that you work with, for example, I mean, how do you really get the truth around? I'm not even going to say any more. Just how do you get the truth?
I think it requires proper questioning at brief time. It requires, ultimately, it requires the client or the individual organisation to buy into that process. So, I'm not responsible for internal culture, but what you can do is prompt the client through industry knowledge, through proper questioning and understanding of their challenges. You have to have a healthy cynicism. You have to have a healthy ability to interrogate what others are telling you, and that's true whether you're sitting within the organisation or not. So if you're the hiring manager or the recruitment internal resourcer, you have to have a healthy cynicism about what you're being told about in a department or role. So it's really about keeping a professional distance and really interrogating what you're being told.
Okay, let's move on to some real sort of specific things now. What content do people want most, in your view? What type of content?
In video, obviously performs extremely well for engagement, but actually, vast majority of my work still remains the written word, and still remains the written word for client publishing. So i.e. for clients to book through their own marketing channels on their own site, in their own sales collateral, email, etc. That remains far outweighs anything else we do.
Is that because it's driven by them, or is that because it's driven by demand?
It's driven by, in the first instance, it's driven by them. So it's driven by the marketing channels that they have chosen to go with, the marketing channels that they have chosen to focus on. And actually, it's proven to be the biggest need that they have, actually, because obviously there's huge variety in client size, but most of the biggest day-to-day problem they have is filling the channels that they've elected to focus on with relevant information. And timely information. There's the phrase about evergreen content, and then what I tend to find is that they'll fill it in January and change it in the following January. And that's so the ability to keep that fresh and to keep it relevant is probably the number one challenge that our clients have.
Okay, I've got quite a few more specific questions, but let's just answer a couple of these on the side panel. So from Steph, what's your advice when you're going through organizational change, specifically cultural change? Fake it till you make it, or tell the truth? We're going through cultural change.
Yeah, one of the things I would say is, again, it depends on the audience. It depends on who you are speaking to. But actually, the ability to influence, the ability to drive change to an organization is hugely attractive. For a professional, in any number of different areas, the ability to, here is our, if you want to get buy-in from it, most people, 90% of people respond best to, here is a problem you can help me solve. And so actually, I wouldn't, you might want to not necessarily talk about the arguments around the water cooler or the fact that, the blood on the carpet, but, to talk about going through change, talk to accepting that you have not completed that journey and that they could help you, I think is a massive USP.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. Okay. Recruiting animal. How hard will you press the client for information in the intake session, especially if you think some info is vague and even unreal when you are trying to write content?
It's a balance. I think that the reality is, if it is vague and even unreal when you're writing it, it's certainly going to be vague and unreal when someone is reading it. And that smacks to authentic content, which is something I'm sure we'll talk about later. But you have to press the client, because ultimately, either internally, so either within a resourcing manager or as an agency working for them, you're judged on results. And so my job is to push the client as hard as I need to push the client in order for me to affect the biggest change or affect the biggest success. So, that said, obviously, the client is paying. So you will push as hard as you can humanly push. Sometimes the client gives you all the information and that is all they have, and there's no point pushing for more. And that's where I would argue a specialist writer, a specialist content provider comes into their own, because they'll know the backstory, they'll know industry's forces, movement within that industry or sector, and they'll be able to add context. So push very hard, but only as hard as you can.
Okay, let's talk about video specifically, because you started, I said to you, what content works best? And you said a video obviously drives the most engagement, or drives a lot of engagement.
A lot of engagement.
So what are you? So how? I mean, what are the reasons why? And then what you said was a lot of your clients will. A lot of what you do with them is going to be written words. So do you need to advise them? Are they nervous about going on camera? Is it expensive? What's the reason why they're not doing more of it?
So one of the things that I think the biggest single mistake, and that's probably too strong a word, but one of the things you see consistently is that the strategy of a particular client grows in exactly in line with the number of distribution channels through which they could book that content. So, you know, what is our Twitter strategy? What is our Instagram strategy? What is our YouTube strategy?
Yeah.
And actually, what that is doing is making you a slave of the channel. It's making you a slave of the technology, and not the other way around. So one of the pieces of advice we would always give is, you know, there's no harm, no foul in deciding you don't want an Instagram strategy. There's, you know, for example, you know, a lot of clients at the higher end. So I'm thinking of, you know, the Bentley types and the Rolls Royces don't have a Facebook strategy because that's not the market after which they wish to go. You know, Instagram suits them perfectly. So you know, by all means, have the kind of the confidence to say, I don't want to do that. Now, when it comes to video tends to be viewed as more expensive. It tends to be something you do once and then squeeze the absolute last pip out of the lemon in terms of usage. So you'll spend a lot of money on, and we know video is expensive, or rather has historically been expensive, but it doesn't need to be. And actually, you're not using it to its best effect. You know, again, when you're looking at a YouTube, one of the things you'll notice, you know, everyone's got these kind of individual stats and their kind of favorite fact. And one of them is that the average dwell time on a YouTube video has quadrupled in the last 5 years. It used to be about 1.5 to 2 minutes. It's now about 8 minutes in terms of video content. Well, think about an 8-minute video, you know, you have to ask the question is, have you got 8 minutes of compelling stuff you want to say? And have the confidence to say, well, I'm going to do 2 minutes, and have the confidence to say, well, I'm going to do 2 minutes. And it doesn't have to be the Gettysburg Address, you know, beautifully shot with dry ice everywhere and kind of, you know, a full orchestra playing in the background. Actually, when working on a lot of stuff that we did at the Telegraph, the Facebook Live Periscope stuff far outperformed the more professional content because it was real. So it doesn't have to be expensive, and it doesn't have to be. It doesn't have to be same as everybody else's in terms of, right, you know, we know that 8 minutes is the best, therefore it has to be 8 minutes. Because the second you get to minute 4 and you're running out of compelling reasons to watch, you know, that's when you've wasted their time and yours. Yeah,
I do 30-second videos on my phone, put it on LinkedIn, and within 5 days I've got 4,000 views.
And it's just it really isn't. I mean, you know, of course,
it's not planned either.
No,
not planned either. It's just a that's an interesting idea, and I put it straight on my phone.
All you need to do is,
some of it's great, and some of it's not so great, but
it needs to pique interest. It needs to pique interest. And funnily enough, if you do one a year, you know, but you're putting so much pressure on that one piece of content to be so good and so groundbreaking, you're almost disappointed when it isn't. And of course, it can't be all things to all people. So you know, have the confidence to just, but as you say, bite-sized pieces.
You know, on that subject, I also think the notion that you only get one chance at a first impression, I think that's irrelevant. I don't think it matters. And the amount of times in the last couple of years where we've made an impression which wasn't quite good enough, and we've taken some feedback, we've gone back, and they've gone, yeah, and that's brilliant. You've listened to what we said, and the second impression we get is that's exactly what we're looking for. And I think you absolutely can.
People are far more forgiving online than they are in print. So the important thing online is that if you get it, quotes, wrong, if you get then the important thing is the engagement with the feedback and being seen to address that. People absolutely will forgive mistakes or slightly ill-considered, things that you put out. Maybe they disagree with the style or the tone or whatever. But what they will absolutely do is forgive if you're seen to engage with that. So, to your point, absolutely, you can come back. There's nothing is lost.
Yeah. So you've, I think that's true about recycling as well. And, you talked about you put one video, you've got to squeeze every last bit of juice out of that video. But actually, there's a lot of people that think, oh, we create one video, we share it once, and if people don't engage with it, then that's, it's only a one shot we've got at this. I think recycle like crazy is what I say.
So there's two things within that. One is absolutely recycle, tweet the same stuff 4, 5, 6 times a day. People pick up stuff at different times, work with Twitter, work with Facebook. They'll tell you, they have all the stats, make sure they'll tell you when you should be releasing stuff. And absolutely, it's not recycling. It's making sure it gets in front of the right people. You're not recycling old content. You're putting out new content at more convenient times. Secondly, the one that always amazes me slightly is that don't operate in a bubble. So, every industry, if you like, has a calendar of events, has a calendar of maybe it might be results days. It might be days where a budget announcement comes out, whatever it might be. Work with that calendar, because actually what you can do then is release your information in a timely fashion around certain set points within the year and get a far, far bigger hit that way. So shamelessly use what's already out there and what other people are doing. Why wouldn't you? The idea that we're operating or you are operating in a bubble just is incorrect.
Yeah, absolutely. And in recruitment, I believe in the approach, which is go and recycle. Can't remember the alternative word you suggested there, but anyway, I'm just going to say it: recycle. Go and recycle all of the content that's been created by your marketing team, and by your investor relations people, and by your internal learning and development people. Because that's all skills-focused content. There's loads of different sources of content that you can use, which were not created with the purposes of recruitment, but can absolutely be used.
Absolutely.
To create interest.
And you can repurpose it. So there's no, there's absolutely nothing wrong with taking a significant piece of work done by some investor relations, for example, or some of your learning and development, and just repurpose the language to make it either punchier for Twitter or slightly more long form for your own website, whatever it is you want to do. But repurposing content is a skill, and you can use it to huge effect and save yourself an absolute fortune.
Yes, absolutely. That's one of my favorite things that you've said. Repurposing content is a skill, and you can save an absolute fortune. We touched briefly on you effectively you cautioned against the perils of, or the trapdoor of, using every channel available. How do you believe an organization should, and you used the sort of Rolls Royce have decided that Facebook's not for them, whereas something else is. How should in recruitment, how should we be trying to think about which channels are going to be best?
So first and foremost is obviously know your audience. So know your audience, know what your end game is. So every different channel has a thing and a product and a service or an outcome that it's best suited for. So really be honest with yourself. The first thing before you do anything else is be honest with yourself. What is it you want to achieve with a particular piece of content or with a particular project? You need to know your audience. You need to then package your audience into however many subsections that you feel that there are. And obviously, software helps you do that, and that's kind of the way forward. But so you need to understand to whom it is you are talking. Now, in a lot of cases, actually, as I mentioned earlier, that's a closed environment. That's a closed community. And so in terms of distribution channel, therefore, it will pretty much suggest itself. Yeah. Then it's down to individual or understanding that channel. So understanding what works best on that channel. So things like calls to action on Facebook, things like trailing information stats listicles on Twitter, odd numbers on listicles rather than even numbers work better. It's understanding your individual distribution points, but until you know until you know your audience, you can't really decide.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So my own favorite joke of my own this year was on a Facebook group where somebody asked, what are the best uses of Instagram for recruitment? And my comment was, it's the best place to attract narcissists and sycophants. That was all I had to say about that.
But it does.
Can you point?
Sorry, go on.
Can you point to any real life examples of the "this is our problem, can you solve it" format for ads, etc.?
Oh, that's a good one. Not off the top of my head, but I guess that's why we're talking content, not advertising. Would be my answer. I'm trying to think of an advert that would say this is our problem.
I mean, it's in recruitment. I mean, in recruitment terms, it's happening all the time, isn't it? Is there not? I mean, the companies that know that they need to advance from a technology perspective and innovation. I mean, they're constantly saying, they're constantly saying, you know, we need to get better at this, and maybe you can help us to do it.
Well, you know, particularly at the moment, for example, there's a huge change in gender, you know, in terms of focus on gender, in terms of representation at senior level, in terms of STEM, for example, recruitment of females into STEM subjects. Social mobility is coming, is here, but social mobility, I think, is going to be massive as well. So if you look at a lot of the stuff that banks and financial services are doing in terms of focusing on soft skills, in terms of focusing on, as I say, on gender representation, I think a lot of that content is more or less an admission that they have not performed as they would have liked, are not currently where they wish to be. You know, if you look at some of the stuff I've done personally in my background, a lot of the stuff around Met Police, for example, Metropolitan Police, with BME representation as police officers, was around saying, look, you know, we have huge issues in these areas, and actually you could be part of the solution. So a lot of the stuff we did back then, you know, sort of late 2010 and slightly earlier, was around, you know, come and be part of the solution.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so we're coming to the end, and we're running out of time a little bit now. But we've covered a lot of really interesting subjects, and there's a lot more that I want to be able to cover. So I'm hoping that we can come back and kind of carry this session on in a few weeks' time, if that's okay.
If there's an interest, of course, I'd love to.
Yeah, no, absolutely. But the last thing I really wanted to touch on is, oh, hold on a second. Right, just quickly, Steph's question. Would you always be so over about specifically recruiting BME candidates?
In that instance, so no, not normally. In that instance, we were allowed because of the specific requirements. Obviously, post McPherson, it was allowed essentially. There were rules and that enabled us to do it. But no, I wouldn't normally, or I haven't normally. But again, so in terms of BME, no. But in terms of, say, social mobility, you're able to do it through compelling content, through gender. And again, gender is a difficult one because I dislike intensely the phrase or the kind of idea of writing content for females, as if they're a slightly distinct a subsection of the whole. But again, use of language, use of hyperbole, use of technical terms, all that sort of stuff. You know, you can have that conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so the final thing I wanted to just talk about was, I think within the world that I'm in, which is it's recruitment agencies and it's in-house talent acquisition teams, there is an ongoing progressive understanding that creating more content, creating more personalization is progressively more important. Some businesses say, I'm going to find this hard because my team doesn't have time. Some businesses say, I'm going to find this hard because we don't have the skills internally. What are the main reasons that organizations would outsource to a company like yours?
Well, there's a huge number really. So first and foremost is the time. So is the time.
Yeah.
A lot of the people with whom we work found their own businesses. So, they used to be on the boss's radar to do once a month, once a week, whatever it might be, and that's for good reasons no longer possible. It also becomes as a business grows, or in fact is already large, it becomes a huge challenge to shepherd a disparate group of people, maybe with specialisms that you need getting out there in front of individual audiences, but having to shepherd those people through a process by which you're getting useful content for them becomes a larger and larger part of your role, and that's a pain for all concerned. One of the things we find is if a copywriter or a journalist is able to speak to those people, and journalism is a skill, so no, journalism is the skill of taking complex information from many, many sources and disseminating it down into a kind of a closely argued content piece. No journalist I know, or very, very few, started off in the area in which they became successful. So, rarely do you have someone who's into cars become an automotive journalist. Rarely do you have someone who's into travel become a travel journalist, etc. Most wanted to be journalists first, and then found their niche as they went along. So journalism is the skill. So what we can do is, take that off your plate, and produce content easily and quickly. It also allows proper coordination. So a content calendar, again, that ability to have content when you most need it, to fit alongside your calendar of events and industry standards, if you like. That's the biggest single change I think you can make, that frees you up, and it allows for best possible. There's loads of other things you could be doing and should be doing in terms of housekeeping, SEO, performance, all that sort of stuff, and that's why people outsource.
And surprisingly, I've also looked at your, well, not surprisingly that I've looked at your price list, but I've looked at your price list, and surprisingly, you're an affordable option as well. So, this isn't an advert for Scribe.
No, it isn't. And it's not just Scribe. Actually, it's not. The kind of gig economy and the ability to be flexible. And this isn't just me. It's the difficulty is putting it all together. So an organisation, any organisation who does what I do, can do it for you. And once they've done that, the pricing is not prohibitive.
Yeah. Great. Okay, listen, we need to wrap it up, but I just wanted to say thanks to all the people that have come along and the people that have got involved in the questions and comments on the side. Specific thanks to you, James, for giving us some of your expertise and creating a really lively conversation. I've enjoyed it very much, and as I say, I'd like to ask Siobhan to help us to set this up again. We can maybe do it again in sort of September time.
Yeah,
and
what I'll do, if you don't mind, is if anybody wants to, ask a question afterwards, when I come back, I'll address individual questions if the people have got them.
Terrific. Okay, thanks very much, everybody. And you can find James. Where can they find you? They can find you on LinkedIn.
Yeah, I'm on LinkedIn in the first instance, and that's probably the best place to find me.
James Lancaster, Scribe, and you'll find him.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks, everybody.
Thank you very much.
Bye for now.